Episode 2, The Iron Law of Oligarchy, or Why Organizations Become Elites. Michels' findings on Italian socialist parties are particularly instructive because they illustrate how even organizations committed to democratic values and egalitarian principles can still succumb to the iron law, a phenomenon that underscores the importance of understanding power dynamics within these groups. This highlights the need to consider the complexities of organizational behavior, as these parties quickly became dominated by a small group of charismatic leaders who wielded significant influence over party policy and direction. This is not to suggest that these leaders were inherently corrupt or power-hungry, rather, they had developed the skills and expertise necessary to navigate the intricacies of party politics. They built networks of supporters and allies within the party, which allowed them to shape the party's goals and values in their own image. In doing so, they reinforced the dominant leadership structure. The implications of Michels' research are far-reaching, with significant consequences for our understanding of organizational dynamics. If even organizations committed to democratic principles can still succumb to the iron law, then what hope is there for more hierarchical or authoritarian institutions? This raises important questions about the limitations of democratic ideals in practice. The answer lies not in trying to eliminate power hierarchies altogether, but rather in recognizing the inherent tendency towards oligarchy and designing institutions that can mitigate its effects. One way to achieve this is by building mechanisms for accountability and transparency, which can help counterbalance the natural tendency towards oligarchy. This might involve creating independent oversight bodies, establishing clear rules and procedures for decision-making, or providing opportunities for members to participate in policymaking processes. By doing so, organizations can cultivate a culture of openness and inclusivity that can mitigate the effects of oligarchy. Moreover, these mechanisms can also help prevent the concentration of power. Another approach is to focus on building a diverse range of leaders with different skills, expertise, and perspectives, which can help prevent any one individual or group from dominating the organization. Instead, this distributed form of leadership can be better equipped to respond to changing circumstances. By recognizing the inherent tendency towards oligarchy and designing institutions that can mitigate its effects, we can create organizations that are more democratic, inclusive, and effective in achieving their goals. Ultimately, the iron law of oligarchy is not a moral failing or personal characteristic, it's an inherent feature of complex social coordination that requires careful consideration when designing organizational structures. As we delve deeper into the iron law of oligarchy, it's essential to acknowledge that this concentration of power is a dynamic process shaped by growth, complexity, and environmental pressures. Michels' own research suggests that even organizations committed to democratic principles can gradually succumb to oligarchic tendencies, underscoring the importance of understanding this process. One striking aspect of this process is how it can lead to a self-reinforcing cycle where those in positions of power become increasingly entrenched and difficult to dislodge. This can create stagnation and resistance to change as the organization focuses on maintaining existing structures rather than adapting to new challenges, ultimately hindering innovation. Conversely, finding a balance between these competing demands is crucial. While oligarchic tendencies can sometimes be necessary in certain contexts, it's also important to recognize that they can lead to stagnation. For instance, during times of crisis or uncertainty, clear leadership or decision-making authority can provide stability and direction, which is essential for navigating difficult circumstances. However, this doesn't mean the organization is forever doomed, rather, it's a temporary measure that requires careful consideration. Ultimately, the key question becomes how to design institutions and organizational structures that balance effective decision-making with democratic participation and accountability. This requires distributing power more evenly, creating opportunities for diverse perspectives and expertise, and establishing mechanisms for holding leaders accountable and encouraging innovation. By doing so, we can create organizations that are both efficient and inclusive, able to navigate complex challenges while remaining true to their founding principles. As the organization's power structure becomes entrenched, it's natural to wonder whether there's any way to break this cycle of oligarchy. Can we design institutions that allow for genuine participation and accountability, rather than simply reinforcing the status quo? Michels himself was skeptical about overcoming the iron law, suggesting that even well-intentioned organizations would eventually succumb to elite dominance, raising important questions about creating more democratic organizations. However, I'd argue that this pessimism is unwarranted. While it's true that large-scale coordination poses significant challenges to democratic decision-making, it doesn't necessarily follow that power will always concentrate at the top. In fact, there are many examples of organizations that have successfully navigated these complexities and maintained a commitment to democratic principles, suggesting that overcoming the iron law is not only possible but also necessary for creating more just and equitable societies. One key insight is that effective decision-making doesn't require a single, centralized authority. Instead, we can design institutions that empower diverse groups and individuals to take ownership of specific aspects of the organization's work. This decentralized approach might involve creating structures such as committees or task forces, which allow for more participatory decision-making, thereby mitigating the challenges posed by large-scale coordination. In fact, this type of structure can foster a sense of shared responsibility. Another crucial factor is the role of transparency and accountability mechanisms. When leaders are held accountable for their actions and decisions, they're less likely to abuse their power or pursue personal interests at the expense of the organization's goals. This can be achieved through measures such as regular reporting, auditing, and independent oversight bodies, which ensure that power is not concentrated at the top. Moreover, transparency fosters trust among stakeholders. Ultimately, the key question becomes how we can design institutions and organizational structures that balance the need for effective decision-making with the need for democratic participation and accountability. To achieve this, we must find ways to distribute power more evenly, create opportunities for diverse perspectives and expertise, establish mechanisms for holding leaders accountable, and encourage innovation and adaptation. By doing so, we can create organizations that are both efficient and inclusive, able to navigate complex challenges while remaining true to their founding principles and values. As we delve deeper into the iron law of oligarchy, it's essential to acknowledge that this concentration of power is not a moral failing or personal flaw, but rather an inherent feature of large-scale organizations. It's a consequence of the very complexity and scale of modern societies, which requires coordination and decision-making on a massive level. This highlights the need to rethink our assumptions about power and organization, revealing the tension between efficiency and democracy that arises from these complexities. Furthermore, this understanding underscores the importance of designing institutions that mitigate the effects of oligarchy. To mitigate the effects of oligarchy, we must rethink our assumptions about power and organization. Rather than viewing power as something held by an individual or a small group, we need to recognize it as a diffuse phenomenon that flows through networks and relationships. This perspective challenges traditional notions of leadership and authority, suggesting that power is not solely the domain of those at the top, but rather a complex web of interactions. By adopting this perspective, we can work towards creating organizations that are more equitable and just. Instead, we must design institutions and organizational structures that facilitate collective decision-making and empower diverse perspectives. This requires creating spaces for dialogue, deliberation, and experimentation, where individuals can bring their unique skills, expertise, and experiences to the table. By doing so, we can create organizations that are more resilient, innovative, and responsive. The key question becomes how to balance effective decision-making with democratic participation and accountability. Moreover, this requires finding ways to distribute power more evenly, creating opportunities for diverse perspectives and expertise, and establishing mechanisms for holding leaders accountable and encouraging innovation. By doing so, we can create organizations that are both efficient and inclusive, able to navigate complex challenges while remaining true to their founding principles. Ultimately, the iron law of oligarchy serves as a powerful reminder of the inherent tension between democracy and organization. It highlights the need for ongoing dialogue, experimentation, and innovation in our efforts to create more just and equitable societies. Furthermore, by acknowledging this tension and working to mitigate its effects, we can build organizations that are truly democratic, where power is distributed widely and decision-making is inclusive. As we delve deeper into the iron law of oligarchy, it's essential to recognize that this concentration of power is not a result of individual flaws or biases, but rather an inherent feature of complex social systems. Michels' research on Italian socialist parties provides a striking example of how even organizations committed to democratic principles can fall prey to this phenomenon, despite their egalitarian ideals. This raises important questions about the nature of power and organization. Can large-scale collective action remain democratic and inclusive, or does an inherent tension between democracy and organization exist that cannot be fully resolved? The iron law of oligarchy suggests that this tension is a fundamental aspect of complex social systems, where coordination and efficiency needs can lead to power concentration in a few individuals. Moreover, this raises concerns about the potential consequences of unchecked power concentration. One potential solution lies in decentralized decision-making structures. By distributing power and influence throughout an organization, we can create spaces for diverse perspectives and voices to be heard. This might involve smaller working groups or committees empowered to make decisions independently, rather than relying solely on centralized leadership. In doing so, organizations can foster collaboration, inclusivity, and ultimately more effective decision-making, leading to a stronger sense of community. Another approach involves fostering transparency and accountability within organizations. By making decision-making processes open and accessible, we can increase trust and participation among members, reducing the likelihood of power concentration in a few individuals. This might involve regular reporting and evaluation mechanisms, as well as opportunities for members to provide feedback and input on key decisions. Transparency can also help mitigate the effects of the iron law of oligarchy, which is crucial for building organizations that are truly democratic. Ultimately, the iron law of oligarchy serves as a powerful reminder of the ongoing need for innovation and experimentation in creating just and equitable societies. By acknowledging this tension between democracy and organization, we can work to build organizations that are truly democratic, with power distributed widely and decision-making inclusive and participatory. Furthermore, recognizing the inevitability of power concentration can help us develop strategies to mitigate its effects. As we delve deeper into Michels' concept of the iron law of oligarchy, it's essential to recognize that power concentration isn't a result of nefarious intentions or malicious actions. Rather, it's an inevitable consequence of complex social coordination. The more intricate an organization becomes, the greater the need for centralized decision-making and specialized expertise. However, this doesn't mean abandoning hope of creating truly democratic and inclusive organizations. On the contrary, Michels' work suggests that acknowledging the tension between democracy and organization is crucial for building more just and equitable societies. By implementing mechanisms promoting transparency, accountability, and participation, we can mitigate the effects of the iron law of oligarchy and create organizations representative of their members. Moreover, fostering a culture of continuous learning and improvement within an organization can help achieve this goal. One potential strategy for achieving this involves cultivating a culture of continuous learning and improvement within an organization. This might involve regular reporting and evaluation mechanisms, as well as opportunities for members to provide feedback and input on key decisions. By promoting shared ownership and responsibility among all stakeholders, we can create organizations that are more resilient, adaptable, and responsive to their needs. Furthermore, this approach can help organizations stay ahead of the curve in an ever-changing world. Ultimately, the iron law of oligarchy serves as a powerful reminder of the ongoing need for innovation and experimentation in our efforts to create more just and equitable societies. As we continue to explore Michels' theory, it's essential to recognize the implications of the iron law on our understanding of organizational dynamics, as well as its far-reaching consequences for how we approach collective action and social coordination. One potential response to this problem is to focus on creating more decentralized or participatory structures, where power is distributed among multiple stakeholders rather than concentrated at the top. This approach can foster shared ownership and responsibility among all stakeholders, ultimately leading to organizations that are more resilient, adaptable, and responsive to their members' needs. However, it's crucial to acknowledge that this approach is not without its challenges. Decentralized decision-making processes can be messy and inefficient, as different stakeholders may have competing interests or priorities. Additionally, the lack of a clear hierarchy or central authority can lead to confusion and paralysis, particularly in situations where swift action is required. In light of these difficulties, it's tempting to conclude that the iron law is an insurmountable obstacle to democratic organization. However, this would be to underestimate the power of human creativity and innovation. By implementing mechanisms promoting transparency, accountability, and participation, we can work to build organizations that are truly democratic, where power is distributed widely and decision-making is inclusive and participatory. To overcome these challenges, it requires a willingness to experiment with new forms of governance and coordination, as well as a commitment to ongoing learning and adaptation. Moreover, it necessitates a deep understanding of the underlying social dynamics at play, including the ways in which power and influence are exercised within organizations. Additionally, the lack of a clear hierarchy or central authority can lead to confusion and paralysis, particularly in situations where swift action is required. Ultimately, the iron law of oligarchy serves as a powerful reminder of the ongoing need for innovation and experimentation in our efforts to create more just and equitable societies. By acknowledging this tension between democracy and organization, we can work to build organizations that truly embody democratic principles, where power is distributed widely and decision-making is inclusive and participatory. As we delve deeper into Michels' theory, it's essential to recognize that the iron law of oligarchy isn't just a descriptive phenomenon but also has profound implications for our understanding of organizational dynamics. Moreover, this concentration of power at the top can have far-reaching consequences for the organization as a whole, shaping its culture, values, and ultimately, its effectiveness. One of the most significant effects is the stifling of dissenting voices and innovative ideas. When decision-making becomes more centralized, those at the periphery may feel discouraged from sharing their perspectives or proposing alternative solutions, leading to a lack of creativity, stagnation, and decline over time. This can result in the suppression of minority views, perpetuating an environment of conformity rather than constructive debate. In addition, the iron law of oligarchy underscores the need for organizations to be able to respond quickly and effectively to changing circumstances. As environments change and new challenges emerge, it's crucial that organizations adapt and evolve. However, when power is concentrated at the top, decision-making processes can become slow and rigid, making adaptation difficult. The concentration of power at the top can have far-reaching consequences for an organization's ability to respond effectively to changing circumstances. When a small group has the final say in decision-making, it can lead to a lack of diversity in perspectives and ideas, resulting in organizational myopia where the organization is unable to see beyond its own interests or adapt to new challenges. Moreover, this concentration of power can also lead to leaders becoming increasingly isolated from the rest of the organization. Furthermore, when power is concentrated at the top, there is often a tendency for leaders to surround themselves with yes-men and sycophants who prioritize pleasing their leader over providing constructive criticism or challenging the status quo. This can ultimately lead to stagnation where new ideas are stifled by fear. Despite these challenges, it's essential to recognize that the iron law of oligarchy doesn't necessarily mean organizations must succumb to power concentration at the top. Rather, it highlights the need for ongoing efforts to promote democracy and participation within organizations, which can involve decentralizing decision-making authority, creating opportunities for diverse perspectives and voices to be heard, a crucial step in fostering truly democratic organizations. Ultimately, the iron law of oligarchy serves as a powerful reminder that the struggle for democratic values is an ongoing process of organizational design and development. By acknowledging this tension between democracy and organization, we can work to build organizations that are truly democratic, where power is distributed widely and decision-making is inclusive, a goal that requires careful consideration of Michels' research on Italian socialist parties in the early 20th century. As we delve deeper into the iron law of oligarchy, it's essential to acknowledge that this concentration of power is not a product of individual personalities or character traits, but rather an inherent feature of large-scale organizations attempting to coordinate collective action. Michels' research provides compelling evidence for this law, which underscores the importance of understanding the underlying dynamics at play in designing truly democratic organizations. In fact, Michels' own observations suggest that the more an organization emphasizes its commitment to democracy, the more it may inadvertently create conditions conducive to oligarchic tendencies. This is because the process of creating a shared sense of purpose and collective identity can lead to a concentration of power in the hands of those who are best equipped to articulate and mobilize this vision. This raises important questions about how we might design organizations that are truly democratic, where power is distributed widely and decision-making is inclusive and participatory. One strategy involves decentralizing decision-making authority, allowing for greater autonomy and self-organization at the local level. Another approach involves creating opportunities for diverse perspectives and voices to be heard through formal mechanisms like representative councils or informal networks of communication. Ultimately, the iron law of oligarchy serves as a powerful reminder that the struggle for democratic values is not just a matter of individual character or leadership style, but rather an ongoing process of organizational design and development. This realization highlights the tension between democracy and organization, which we can work to address by building organizations that are truly democratic. Michels' research on Italian socialist parties demonstrates that even organizations with a strong commitment to democratic values and egalitarian principles cannot escape the gravitational pull of oligarchy. Despite their best efforts to promote participation and inclusivity, these organizations inevitably succumb to the concentration of power in the hands of a few key individuals or groups, which is a natural consequence of their organizational dynamics. This is not to say that these leaders are inherently corrupt or power-hungry, rather, they have simply developed the skills and expertise necessary to navigate organizational decision-making complexities. The implications of the iron law of oligarchy are far-reaching, extending beyond political organizations to encompass all social and economic institutions. This phenomenon's consequences extend beyond large-scale coordination efforts. It has significant effects on all manner of social and economic institutions. Whether a corporation seeks to maximize profits, a non-profit organization strives to achieve its mission, or a community group works towards a common goal, the tendency towards oligarchy is an inherent feature of large-scale coordination. As we delve deeper into the implications of the iron law of oligarchy, it becomes clear that this phenomenon has significant consequences for all social and economic institutions. The tendency towards oligarchy is an inherent feature of large-scale coordination efforts, regardless of whether a corporation seeks to maximize profits, a non-profit organization strives to achieve its mission, or a community group works towards a common goal.